The crowd of alien soldiers cheered as they dragged Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen to the execution platform. His green beret sat crooked on his bloodied head, the only thing they had allowed him to keep. The Zephyrian Empire's capital world buzzed with excitement. Today, they would make an example of the human who had dared to resist their conquest of Earth. Marcus had been captured 3 days ago during the failed defense of New York. His special forces team had held off an entire Zephyrian battalion for 6 hours, buying time for civilian evacuations. When the smoke cleared, he was the only one left standing among the rubble of what used to be Times Square. General Vexitar, the scaled commander of the Zephyrian forces, stepped onto the platform. His forearms gestured dramatically to the gathered crowd of soldiers and officials. The translation device around his neck crackled to life. Citizens of the Empire, today we execute the last symbol of human resistance. This creature and his kind thought they could stand against our might. Look how wrong they were. Marcus said nothing. His hands were bound behind his back with energy shackles that burned his wrists. Blood dripped from cuts on his face, but his eyes remained steady. He had made peace with his fate days ago. The general continued his speech, describing how the Zephyrian Empire had conquered over 200 worlds, how their technology was superior, how their military was unstoppable, how humans were just another primitive species that would serve as slaves in their vast empire. This human's people surrendered after we destroyed just 5 of their cities. Vextar laughed, his voice echoing across the plaza. They begged for mercy like all the others. Yet this one still fought, still believed his pathetic species had worth. The crowd hissed and snarled in approval. Zephyrians were predators by nature, standing nearly 8 feet tall with razor-sharp claws and teeth. They respected strength but despised what they saw as weakness. Marcus finally spoke, his voice cutting through the alien chatter. "You made one mistake, General." Vextar turned, surprised. "The dead do not speak unless given permission, human." "You should have studied our history better," Marcus said, spitting blood onto the platform. "You should have learned what happens when you back a human into a corner. What happens when you threaten everything we hold dear." The general laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Your species lasted exactly 72 hours against our fleet. Your weapons were toys, your armies scattered like frightened animals. What could you possibly do now?" Marcus looked up at the sky, where Zephyrian ships hung like dark clouds over the city. Then he smiled, showing bloody teeth. "You really should have done your homework." "Enough of this nonsense," Vextar snarled. He drew his plasma blade, its purple energy crackling in the alien sunlight. "Any last words before I remove your head, human?" Marcus straightened his shoulders despite the pain. He thought of his team, of the billions of humans now enslaved across Earth, of his daughter who had died in the first bombardment. When he spoke, his voice was clear and strong. "I am Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen, United States Army Special Forces. I serve with honor. I will never surrender. I will never give up, and neither will my people." The general raised his blade high above his head. "Die knowing your species is broken, human." But as the weapon began its deadly arc downward, Marcus wasn't looking at death. He was looking at his watch, counting down the seconds. 3, 2, 1. The blade never reached his neck. Instead, the entire platform shook as a massive explosion rocked the city. Then another, and another. The Zephyrian ships in the sky began falling like burning meteors. General Vextar stumbled, his blade clattering across the platform. "What is happening?" he roared into his communicator. "Report, all units, report." Static answered him, then screaming, then silence. Marcus was still smiling as the first human dropships appeared through the smoke and fire, their engines roaring like the fury of an entire species unleashed. The rescue mission had worked perfectly. "You wanted to know about human history, General?" Marcus said as laser fire erupted around them, and Zephyrian soldiers began falling. "Let me teach you about something we call a Special Forces operation." The attack came from everywhere at once. Human soldiers poured from dropships that seemed to materialize from thin air. Explosions rocked every major Zephyrian installation across the capital simultaneously. The supposedly impregnable orbital defenses crumbled like paper castles. General Vexitar stumbled backwards, his forearms flailing as he tried to reach his weapon. Around him, his elite guards were falling to precise human gunfire. These weren't the scared, desperate humans they had crushed on Earth. These soldiers moved with deadly precision, their black armor gleaming under the burning sky. Impossible, Vextar whispered, watching his forces dissolve around him. We destroyed their military. We monitored their communications. They surrendered! Marcus flexed his arms and the energy shackles sparked and died. He caught them as they fell, wrapping the still glowing restraints around his fist like brass knuckles. You destroyed our conventional forces, yes. You monitored our official channels, true, but you never understood what humans do when you kill our children. A human soldier appeared beside Marcus, tossing him a rifle. The name tape on the soldier's uniform read, Williams. Good to see you alive, Sergeant. Sorry we're late. Right on time, actually, Marcus replied, checking his weapon. Status report? All objectives secured. Their command structure is down. Admiral Zhang sends her regards and says the fleet is in position. Vextar's translator struggled with the rapid English, but he caught enough to feel his blood freeze. Fleet? What fleet? We destroyed your space capabilities. Marcus turned to face the general, his expression cold as winter. You destroyed our public space capabilities. You monitored our government communications. You thought you knew everything about humanity because you watched our news broadcasts and intercepted our military radio chatter. The sounds of battle were dying around them as human forces secured the area. In the distance, more Zephyrian ships were falling from the sky, their hulls torn apart by weapons that shouldn't exist. But you never bothered to learn about our black projects, Marcus continued. You never discovered the facilities hidden in our deepest oceans, our highest mountains, our most remote deserts. You thought 72 hours was impressive. We've been planning for this moment since the day you arrived. Williams handed Marcus a communication device. Through it came the calm voice of Admiral Sarah Zhang, speaking from somewhere in space above them. This is Admiral Zhang aboard the TSS Retribution. All Zephyrian orbital assets have been neutralized. Ground forces report 97% success rate on primary objectives. The package is secure. Vextar tried to access his own communications but found only dead silence. His empire's supposedly unbreakable quantum encryption had been completely severed. How did you break our codes? Our technology is centuries ahead of yours. Technology? Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. General, you made the classic mistake of every conqueror in human history. You assumed that because you could destroy our cities, you had defeated our spirit. You thought that because you killed our soldiers, you had broken our will. The general's scales began to pale as the implications hit him. The surrender. It was fake. Every government transmission you intercepted was carefully crafted. Every military communication you decoded was designed to feed you exactly what we wanted you to hear. While you were celebrating your easy victory, we were mobilizing resources you never knew existed. Marcus gestured to the burning city around them. You see, General, humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. We've learned that sometimes you have to lose a battle to win a war. Sometimes you have to sacrifice pawns to capture the king. But the casualties, the cities you destroyed, millions of humans died. And every one of them died knowing their sacrifice would buy time for this moment. Marcus replied, his voice hard as steel. You wanted to know about human history? We've been invaded before. By other humans, yes, but invaded nonetheless. We've learned that no matter how dark things get, no matter how hopeless the situation seems, there's always a way to fight back. Through the smoke, more human vehicles appeared. Tanks that moved silent as shadows. Aircraft that bent light around them like mirages. Soldiers who seemed to appear and disappear at will. The technology gap you mentioned? Williams added, pulling off his helmet to reveal a young face with old eyes. Turns out when you threaten to enslave an entire species, they get very creative very quickly. Our best minds had 10 years to prepare for your arrival. We saw your ships coming long before you thought we did. Vextar looked around desperately, searching for any sign of his forces. All he saw were human soldiers efficiently securing the area and tending to their own wounded. His mighty empire's capital had fallen in less than an hour. This is impossible, he whispered. We are the Zephyrian Empire. We have conquered 200 worlds. Marcus stepped closer, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. And now you're about to learn why Earth will be the last world you ever touch. Admiral Zhang's voice crackled through the communication device again, but this time she wasn't speaking to Marcus. She was broadcasting on all Zephyrian frequencies. Her words translated into every language in their empire. Citizens of the former Zephyrian Empire, this is Admiral Sarah Zhang of the Terran Defense Force. Your leadership made a grave error when they attacked our world. They assumed humanity was weak because we value life. They confused our desire for peace with inability to wage war. General Vextar stared at the device in horror. How are you broadcasting on our secure channels? Our quantum encryption is unbreakable. Marcus smiled grimly. Remember those 10 years we had to prepare? We weren't just building weapons, General. We were building something much more dangerous than ships or bombs. We were building a network. What network? Vextar demanded. But his voice was already weakening as the reality of his situation sank in. Every species you've conquered, every world you've enslaved, every population you've brutalized, Williams explained, checking his weapon. They've all been waiting for someone to show them that the Zephyrian Empire could bleed. The Admiral's broadcast continued, now accompanied by video feeds showing human forces successfully capturing key installations across multiple worlds simultaneously. For too long, your empire has spread across the galaxy like a plague, crushing the innocent and enslaving the weak. Today that ends. Marcus walked to where General Vextar had dropped his communicator and picked it up. The device was receiving hundreds of signals from across Zephyrian space. Every single one told the same story. Rebellion, uprising, revolution. You see, General, when your forces invaded Earth, they missed something important. They found our governments, our militaries, our obvious defensive installations. But they never found our anthropologists, our linguists, our cultural specialists. While you were busy bombing our cities, we were busy learning everything we could about every species you'd conquered. We studied their languages, their customs, their histories, and most importantly, we learned about their hatred for you. The communication device exploded with incoming reports. On Vextar's homeworld, the enslaved Cathari had risen up and seized the planetary defense grid. On the mining world of Zerion 7, human special forces had armed the native workers with weapons specifically designed to penetrate Zephyrian armor. Across the Empire, carefully placed human agents were activating sleeper cells that had been years in the making. This is madness, Vextar whispered. You couldn't have coordinated all of this. Our intelligence networks would have detected such a massive operation. Your intelligence networks only looked for military threats, Marcus replied. You never bothered to monitor the aid workers, the cultural exchange students, the peace activists, people who could move freely through your empire because they seemed harmless. Williams pulled up a holographic display showing the galactic map. Red indicators were lighting up across hundreds of systems as Zephyrian control collapsed like a house of cards. Every human you saw in your worlds for the past decade was there for a reason. Some were gathering intelligence. Others were making contacts with resistance groups. Many were simply waiting for the signal to begin. The signal that was my execution, Marcus added. You wanted to make a public example of human resistance? Congratulations. You just broadcast the beginning of your empire's end to every enslaved world in your territory. Admiral Zhang's voice cut through their conversation. General Vextar, if you're listening, you should know that your emperor is no longer in control of his palace. The Cathari servants you trusted have taken him prisoner. The Nexari guards you relied on have joined the rebellion. Your empire is finished. Vextar tried to access the Imperial communication network but found only chaos. His command codes had been changed. His authority had been revoked. Even his personal guards had abandoned their posts. How did you turn them against us so quickly? He asked, his voice breaking. We didn't turn them, General, Marcus said quietly. They were never really yours to begin with. You ruled through fear and intimidation, not loyalty. The moment someone showed them that you could be defeated, that you weren't the unstoppable force you pretended to be, they remembered who they really were. Through the smoke and chaos, more human transports were landing. But these weren't carrying soldiers. They were carrying supplies, medical equipment, communication gear, the tools needed to help newly liberated worlds govern themselves. The difference between your empire and what comes next, Williams explained, is that we're not here to conquer. We're here to liberate. Every world you enslaved gets to choose its own path forward. Every species you oppressed gets to determine its own future. Marcus looked at his watch again. By my calculations, General, your empire just lost approximately 80% of its territory in the last 2 hours. The remaining 20% will fall within the next 6 hours as word spreads and more resistance groups activate. But why? Vextar asked desperately. Why would humans risk everything for species you've never even met? Marcus thought about his daughter, about the billions who had died in the initial attack, about the sacrifice that had made this moment possible. When he answered, his voice was steady and sure. Because that's what humans do, General. When we see suffering, we try to stop it. When we see injustice, we fight it. When we see bullies picking on those who can't defend themselves, we step in and even the odds. The general's communicator crackled one final time before going silent forever. The Zephyrian Empire, which had ruled the galaxy for 3 centuries, had effectively ceased to exist. The scope of the human operation became clear as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. What had seemed like a simple rescue mission was actually the culmination of the largest covert operation in galactic history. Marcus received a new communication device from Williams. This one configured to receive reports from human teams across former Zephyrian space. The numbers were staggering. Over 3,000 human operatives had been working throughout the Empire for years, some for over a decade. "Control, this is Theta Team on Rigel Prime," came one report. "Local resistance has secured the orbital shipyards. Zephyrian fleet construction capabilities are now 0. Delta Squad reporting from the Centauri Mining Collective. All extraction operations have ceased. The Nexari workers have seized control of the heavy machinery. The Zephyrians' entire raw material supply line is cut. Epsilon Group on Vega Station. Financial networks are down. Imperial credits are worthless. The economic backbone of the Empire has collapsed." General Vextar listened to each report with growing horror. "How long have you been planning this?" "Since before your ships entered our solar system," Marcus replied. "We detected your approach vessels when they were still 2 light years away. Your stealth technology works well against most species, but humans have always been good at pattern recognition." Williams brought up another holographic display, this one showing a timeline stretching back 15 years. First contact protocols were activated the moment we confirmed alien ships were heading toward Earth. Every government on our planet contributed resources to a single, unified defense initiative. "But you surrendered so quickly," Vextar protested weakly. "Your resistance lasted only 72 hours. "Our public resistance lasted 72 hours, Marcus corrected. "Our real resistance had been in position for years before you arrived. Every human you captured, every official who surrendered, every communication you intercepted was part of a carefully orchestrated performance." The communication device chimed with another report. "Gamma Team on Proxima Beta. The local Cathari population has successfully overthrown their Zephyrian overseers. They're requesting assistance with transitional government protocols." Alpha Company reporting from the Zephyrian home system. "Emperor Zexthal has been taken into protective custody by liberated Nexari forces. All Imperial edicts have been rescinded." Marcus turned to Vextar, whose scales had gone completely white with shock. "You see, General, your Empire made one fundamental mistake about human nature. You assumed that because we hadn't spread across the galaxy conquering other species, we lacked the capability to do so. The truth is, we had the technology to become a galactic power centuries ago. We chose not to because we believed in letting other species develop naturally, without interference. But when you threatened our world, you forced us to abandon that philosophy." Williams nodded grimly. "Every piece of technology you've seen today has existed in some form for decades. The stealth ships, the quantum communication systems, the advanced weapons. We kept them secret because we hoped we'd never need to use them. The orbital platforms you destroyed above Earth? Decoys. Our real defensive installations were hidden in asteroid fields, gas giant atmospheres, and deep space. Your sensors never detected them because they weren't designed to look for human engineering principles." Another report came through the communication system. "Control, this is Zeta Team on Arcturus Station. The Zephyrian research facilities have been secured. We've recovered data on their biological weapons programs and plan to share the countermeasures with all affected species." General Vextar slumped against a piece of debris, the weight of his empire's destruction crushing down on him. "How many of our worlds are still under Imperial control?" Marcus checked the tactical display. Red zones indicating active resistance now covered over 90% of former Zephyrian territory. "At last count, 12 worlds, General, and those are only holding because our teams haven't reached them yet. This is impossible. We ruled for 3 centuries. We had the most advanced military in the galaxy. We were undefeated." "You were undefeated against species that fought the way you expected them to fight," Williams explained. "Stand-up battles between conventional forces, ship-to-ship combat, direct military confrontation. You never faced an enemy that understood asymmetric warfare. Humans have been fighting guerrilla wars, insurgencies, and special operations for thousands of years. We know how to strike from the shadows, how to turn a population against its rulers, how to make an enemy's strength work against them. Marcus walked over to where his green beret had fallen during the initial chaos and picked it up, brushing off the dust. Special Forces doctrine is very simple, General. Find the enemy's weakness and exploit it. Your weakness was that you ruled through fear rather than consent. The moment we showed your subjects that you could be hurt, that you weren't invincible, your entire power structure crumbled. Fear only works as long as people believe the thing they're afraid of is unstoppable. The final reports were coming in now. The Zephyrian Empire, which had controlled over 400 star systems just 6 hours ago, now held fewer than a dozen. Most of their fleet was destroyed or captured. Their leadership was either dead or in custody. What happens to us now? Vextar asked quietly. Marcus considered the question carefully. That depends on your people, General. The species you conquered will decide what justice looks like for the Zephyrian Empire. Humans will help facilitate those discussions, but we won't impose our will on others the way you did. Some may choose mercy, others may demand retribution, but all of them will have the chance to choose their own futures. That's what freedom means. Williams received a final transmission and nodded to Marcus. All objectives complete, Sergeant. Admiral Zhang is requesting your presence. Aboard the flagship for the transition planning session, SAO, human transport ships began evacuating liberated prisoners and establishing communication networks between freed worlds. Marcus looked out at the burning remains of the Zephyrian capital. In 6 hours, humanity had dismantled an empire that had ruled the galaxy for 3 centuries, but more importantly, they had given 400 enslaved worlds the chance to be free. 3 months later, Marcus stood in what had once been the Zephyrian Emperor's throne room, now converted into a diplomatic meeting hall. Representatives from over 200 species filled the vast space, their voices creating a symphony of languages that translation devices struggled to process. The Galactic Liberation Council, as it had come to be called, was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of an empire ruling from above, it was a voluntary association of free worlds working together to rebuild what the Zephyrians had destroyed. Admiral Zhang approached Marcus, carrying a datapad filled with progress reports. The Cathari delegation just approved the Mutual Defense Treaty. That brings us to 157 signatory worlds. And the others? Marcus asked, watching as a group of tall crystalline beings discussed trade agreements with a delegation of furry, bear-like creatures. They're choosing independence, which is exactly what we hoped for. The Nexari are establishing their own confederation. The Rigel colonies want to remain isolated while they recover from 3 centuries of exploitation. We're respecting all of their decisions. Marcus nodded approvingly. In the months since the Empire's collapse, humanity had faced its greatest challenge yet, keeping its promise not to become the thing they had destroyed. It would have been easy to step into the power vacuum left by the Zephyrians, to become the new galactic authority. Instead, every human fleet had strict orders to withdraw once local populations were stable and secure. No human colonies were established on liberated worlds. No human governors were installed to oversee transitional governments. The economic restoration is proceeding ahead of schedule, John continued. The Andromedan Commerce Guild has established trade routes between most of the former imperial worlds. The resource extraction operations are now owned and operated by the species that actually live on those planets. Through the massive windows of the former throne room, Marcus could see ships from dozens of different worlds docked at the station. Where once only Zephyrian vessels had been allowed, now the space around the capital buzzed with free trade and open commerce. What about the Zephyrians themselves? Marcus asked. The trials concluded last week. Most of the military leadership was sentenced to labor rehabilitation, helping to rebuild the worlds they destroyed. The Emperor and his inner circle were exiled to a remote system under supervision. General Vextar specifically requested to work with the Cathari reconstruction efforts. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Interesting choice. He said he wanted to understand what he had taken from them. The Cathari accepted on the condition that he live exactly as their enslaved workers had lived under imperial rule. No special treatment, no privileges, just honest work to make amends. A group of young beings from various species approached them, their excitement palpable. These were the children who had grown up under Zephyrian rule and were now seeing freedom for the first time in their lives. A small Cathari girl, her blue skin marked with the traditional patterns of her people that had been banned under imperial law, tugged on Marcus's uniform. "Are you really the soldier who started the revolution?" Marcus knelt down to her level, smiling gently. I helped. But the revolution started the moment people like your parents decided they deserved to be free. I just gave them the tools to make it happen. Will you stay to help us? Asked a young Nixari boy, his fur striped with colors that indicated he came from one of the mining worlds. For as long as you need us, Marcus replied. But remember, this is your galaxy now. We're just here to help you build whatever kind of future you want. Admiral Zhang's communication device chimed with an incoming message. She listened for a moment, then smiled broadly. Marcus, you're going to want to hear this. It's from Earth. She activated the holographic projector and suddenly President Martinez appeared in miniature above the device. Greetings to our friends across the galaxy. I'm pleased to report that the reconstruction of Earth is complete. Our cities have been rebuilt, our people have healed, and we're ready to take our place as partners in this new galactic community. The President's image gestured to something off-screen. But more importantly, I want to share some wonderful news. The memorial to those who gave their lives during the liberation is now complete. Every name, every sacrifice, every act of heroism has been recorded for all time. To the free peoples of the galaxy, we want you to know that their sacrifice was not just for humanity. It was for the principle that no being should live in chains, that no species should bow to tyrants, that freedom is the birthright of every sentient creature in the universe. Marcus felt a familiar tightness in his chest as he thought of his daughter, of his team, of all those who had died to make this moment possible. Their names would live on not just in stone and metal, but in the free worlds that now stretched across the galaxy. The President concluded his message with words that would echo through the stars. To our new friends among the stars, Earth stands ready to help, to trade, to learn, and to grow together. But we will never again stand by while innocents suffer. The galaxy belongs to all of us, and we will defend that truth with everything we have. As the hologram faded, the diverse crowd in the former throne room erupted in cheers and applause. Species that had been enemies under Zephyrian rule now worked together. Worlds that had been isolated for centuries were reconnecting with their neighbors. Status report on the human fleets? Marcus asked. Withdrawing on schedule. Most of our ships will be back in Sol system within 6 months. We're leaving behind only what each world specifically requests. Technical advisors, medical teams, teachers. Marcus looked around the bustling diplomatic center one last time. In less than a year, humanity had accomplished something unprecedented in galactic history. They had won a war not through conquest but through liberation. They had gained power not by taking it but by giving it away. Ready to go home, Sergeant? Admiral Zhang asked. Marcus adjusted his green beret and nodded. Ready, Admiral. Our work here is done. But as they walked toward their transport, Marcus knew that humanity's greatest adventure was just beginning. The galaxy was free, and for the first time in centuries, anything was possible. 10 years after the fall of the Zephyrian Empire, Marcus Chen stood before a classroom of young cadets from 12 different species. The Terran Military Academy had become the premier institution for studying liberation tactics and ethical warfare throughout the galaxy. Can anyone tell me the most important lesson from the Zephyrian campaign? He asked, his hair now gray but his eyes still sharp. A young Kithari raised her hand. That superior technology doesn't guarantee victory? A good answer, but not quite right, Marcus replied. Anyone else? A Nixari cadet spoke up. That preparation and intelligence gathering are crucial to any successful operation. Also true, but still not the core lesson. A human student from the outer colonies ventured, that freedom is worth any sacrifice? Marcus paused, considering. Close, but that implies we should be willing to sacrifice others for our ideals. The most important lesson is much simpler. Every being has the right to determine their own fate, and sometimes it takes courage to help them claim that right. He activated the holographic display, showing the current state of the galaxy. Where once the Zephyrian Empire had painted the star map in uniform imperial red, now hundreds of different colors represented independent worlds, confederations, and voluntary alliances. The galaxy today has over 300 sovereign governments. Some are democracies, others are constitutional monarchies, a few are collective consciousnesses. The Andromeda Trade Federation operates on pure capitalism, while the Kithari worlds have chosen a resource-sharing commune system. The point isn't that any one system is correct. The point is that each species gets to choose what works for them. A young Zephyrian in the back row raised her hand tentatively. Marcus nodded encouragingly. The children of former Imperial citizens were always welcome in his classes, though they often struggled with guilt over their species' past. Professor Chen, some people say that humans just replaced the Empire with a different kind of control, that the Galactic Defense Initiative is really just human imperialism with better marketing. Marcus smiled. It was a question he heard often, and one he took seriously. That's a fair concern, Cadet Zexarina. Let me ask you this. How many human governors currently rule non-human worlds? None, sir. How many human colonies have been established on liberated worlds? None, sir. How many worlds have been forced to join human-led organizations against their will? None, sir, she repeated, but her voice was growing more confident. And how many worlds have the right to demand that all human forces leave their territory immediately? No questions asked. All of them, sir. Then what makes our approach different from Imperial control? The young Zephyrian straightened in her seat. We can say no, exactly. The moment any world decides they don't want human assistance, we leave. The moment any species chooses isolation over cooperation, we respect that choice. Power that can be refused isn't really power at all. Marcus walked to the window overlooking the academy grounds, where students from across the galaxy trained together, learned together, and forged friendships that would shape the future of interstellar relations. The Galactic Defense Initiative exists for one purpose, only to ensure that what happened under the Zephyrian Empire never happens again. We're not here to rule or to guide or to impose our values. We're here to make sure everyone else gets to keep choosing their own path. He turned back to the class. But there's something else you need to understand about that campaign. Something that's not in the official histories. The students leaned forward, sensing this was something special. The plan almost failed. A collective gasp rose from the class. The liberation of the galaxy was taught as a masterpiece of strategic planning and flawless execution. 3 days before the operation began, our intelligence network on Rigel Prime was discovered. The Zephyrians captured 17 human operatives and were torturing them for information about the broader resistance. Marcus's voice grew quiet, reverent. Those 17 people could have broken. They could have revealed everything. The entire operation would have collapsed and billions would have remained enslaved. But they didn't break. They held out long enough for us to execute the mission. They chose to endure unimaginable suffering rather than betray the hope of freedom for people they'd never met. That's the real lesson of the Zephyrian campaign. Not that humans are great warriors or brilliant strategists. It's that when people believe in something bigger than themselves, when they're willing to sacrifice for others, they become unstoppable. Marcus activated another display, showing the memorial wall that now stretched for miles on Earth. Millions of names were carved into black stone, representing not just humans but every being who had died fighting for freedom during the liberation. Your assignment for next week is to research one person on this wall. Not a famous general or a celebrated hero. Pick someone ordinary, a janitor, a factory worker, a student. Learn their story. Understand what drove them to risk everything for the freedom of strangers. As the students filed out, chattering excitedly about the assignment, Cadet Zexarina approached his desk. Professor Chen, I wanted to thank you for accepting Zephyrian students in your program. I know it can't be easy given what my people did. Marcus looked at the young woman, seeing not the scaled features of a former enemy, but the bright eyes of someone determined to build a better future. Cadet, your people aren't defined by the Empire any more than humans are defined by our worst historical moments. What matters is what you choose to do with the freedom you have now. I want to join the Defense Initiative when I graduate, she said firmly. I want to help make sure no one ever has to go through what the Empire put people through. Marcus nodded approvingly. Then you understand the most important truth of all. Freedom isn't something you win once and keep forever. It's something every generation has to choose to defend. As evening fell over the academy, Marcus made his way to his private office. On his desk sat the same green beret he had worn during that fateful day on the Zephyrian capital. Next to it was a photo of his daughter. And beyond that, letters from across the galaxy. A message from a Kithari artist whose work was now displayed in museums throughout free space. A note from a Nexari engineer whose innovations were helping terraform damaged worlds. A package from a group of Andromedan children who had sent him drawings of their newly independent homeworld. Each letter was a reminder that the sacrifice had been worth it. That freedom, once unleashed, had the power to transform not just individuals but entire civilizations. Marcus picked up his beret and walked to the window. Outside, the stars shone brightly in an infinite sky, each one representing worlds where beings lived and loved and dreamed without fear of tyrants. The galaxy was free, and it would stay that way as long as there were people willing to stand up and say, as he had said all those years ago, "I will never surrender. I will never give up." In classrooms across hundreds of worlds, those words were now taught to every child in every language, as the sacred promise of a free galaxy, that no matter how dark things might become, there would always be someone willing to fight for the light.